Before gay marriage was legal, two men became fathers in the most unexpected way. One of them found a baby in the subway. And fast forward to today, their boy is now a young man in college. They spoke to Tory earlier in today's DBL Spotlight.
Your story is fascinating. You adopted and raised your son after finding him abandoned in the subway as a newborn. Danny, take me back to that day. What happened after you realized what you spotted in the subway was a baby in 2000?
You know, this was before cell phones, so I didn't have any way to notify the police or anything. So I had a quarter in my pocket. Actually, I had a couple of quarters. And so I went up to the payphone up on the street to call the police, and I just said, I found a baby. Well, they probably thought it was a prank call. I said, well, I need to let Pete know. If I call him and he calls, then they'll believe that this is real. So I called him and I blurted out, I found a baby. And as I was saying this and telling him where I was, that's when the police showed up and I just hung the phone up on him.
Okay, so Pete, you're on the other end of the line. You hear, I found a baby. That day, what did you think when he then hung up on you after saying that?
Well, he was late for dinner. We were supposed to have dinner, and he was late, so I thought he was going to tell me he was canceling or even going to be a little bit later. So when I heard him say what he said, I was like, what is going on? That was my first reaction. It was like everything happened, so like millions of thoughts at once. Danny doesn't joke. He doesn't joke around. This must be serious.
Right.
So before he had a chance to hang up with me, I said, where are you? And he blurted out that he was at the 15th Street, 8th Avenue subway station in New York. It was quite a scene. And then we sort of went on with our lives.
Yeah.
You know, he was placed into the foster care system. And then 6 weeks later, Danny gets a call from an administration for children's services lawyer. But you.
Yeah. And so they call me and say, we've been looking for you. And we are having a hearing to terminate the baby's parental rights. I go in there, I tell the story, you know, all the circumstances that led to me finding the baby. And then the judge says, can you stay here for the remainder of the hearing? And the next thing out of her mouth was, would you be interested in adopting this baby?
Oh my gosh.
I paused for a second, and then I said, yes, but I don't think it's that easy. And she said, well, it can be.
Wow.
If you are interested and you say yes, it can be.
Oh my God.
I didn't even realize what was happening. It was just like everything was spinning out of control in that moment.
I gotta be honest,
it is all a blur.
It's all a blur, but I gotta be honest, that's like a divine moment that you were there, they were there, you had that judge with that thought process and everything happened. That's divine. I gotta ask, let's talk about Kevin first off. What is it like for Kevin to learn about the day you found him? Do you guys talk about it? Are y'all open about it? Or do you kind of keep it in the past?
Oh, no.
No, we've always been open about it because we knew this was such a public story.
Right.
That everyone around him in his life
would know
of the story. So we wanted to make sure he heard it from us. So from the earliest days when we would tell him bedtime stories, we would tell him about how we became a family. And as you know, a couple of years later, we then put together Pete put together a very simple children's book of telling the story, but telling the story from the perspective of the train. So the trains are animated. And they tell the story like how we found each other.
I did want to know if you guys have found or had any attempts to find Kevin's birth parents, Danny. And I know that's kind of tricky. Does Kevin want to?
Well, that's a very good question. And you know, early on, he was curious, and so we would tell him what we knew, which was not a lot.
Right.
And so he did have an interest in like just knowing what she might have looked like.
Right.
And as time went on, he kind of like let that go. But most recently, we've talked about this as he's known more about like, you know, where exactly he's from, based on genetic DNA testing.
Sure.
And so we brought this up. We saw him recently, and we brought this up. Would you be interested in, you know, knowing more, you know, meeting anyone? And he said, no. Not right now. I've got too much going on. You know, we let him know that it's okay. I mean, we would want him to be able to know. We wouldn't want to keep any of that from him, or for him to feel like he needs to, in any way, not be able to know that.
Well, tell Kevin I say hello. I just have to say, Danny and Pete, really such a lovely interview. Thank you so much for joining us, for being at that station, for being open to adoption, for the divine. All of that really just made my day, and I'm sure it'll make our viewers' day. Thank you again, and we'll be right back.